Death at Bishop's Keep. Chapter 8. The splendour falls on castle walls. Alfred, Lord Tennyson, The Princess. To Charles Sheridan's surprise, he found the drive to Bishop's Keep rather interesting. Marston was sitting like a stick, busy with his thoughts. Eleanor was no less feather-witted than usual, but Miss Ardley... Miss Ardley. Charles occasionally amused himself by drawing conclusions about people's characters and personal histories from appearances and odd bits of conversation. It was not difficult to conclude from the plain cut and plainer fabric of her costume that Miss Ardley was a poor relation. The woman was not particularly young and not particularly beautiful. She lacked either the interest, the skill, or the funds, perhaps chiefly interest, since most women manage to pretty themselves, no matter what their funds, to devote much attention to her appearance. The undisciplined mass of auburn hair, for instance, bespoke of both a lack of concern for elegance and an unruly will, while the second finger of the right hand bore inky tribute to her acquaintance with the pen. That, and her age, indicated a type. The American spinster abroad, greedily consuming every delight of the excursive experience and writing volumes about it in form of letters home. But there seemed to be more to Miss Ardley than just that, Charles acknowledged. The unruly hair was quite lovely, and the forthright hazel eyes under the straight dark brows unusually striking. She would photograph well. And more, she had intrigued him with her odd remark about Mark Twain's use of fingerprints. It had betrayed an unusual interest. What sort of woman read detective stories? 3/4 of an hour after leaving the station, the carriage with its 4 passengers turned off the road and into a curving lane lined with mist-cloaked beeches. Miss Ardley seemed to be holding an excited expectation in stern check. "I suppose Bishop's Keep is very medieval," she said in an offhand way, glancing across the fog-wreathed landscape. "Medieval?" Eleanor asked in surprise. "Why, no. Why did you—" "Oh, of course, the keep." Charles suppressed a smile. Americans harbored endless misconceptions about England, all the fault of Byron and Wordsworth, and those other soulful purveyors of the romantic view. Caught up in a new world whirlwind of invention and innovation, Americans love to take a holiday from progress to revel in the picturesque, the macabre, the mist. That's what came of having virtually no history of their own, and definitely no castles, and very little fog either. "You've been reading thrillers," Bradford remarked. "Towers and turrets and dead bodies and great chests and bats in the belfries." Charles was distracted from his reflections on the American temperament. "Ah, bats," he said energetically. "Did you know that there is a bat in this locality that is quite a rare little fellow, Eleanor's laugh was a melodious tinkle. "I'm sure Catherine will have more exciting things to do than spy out bats for you, Charles." Are you saying that Bishop's Keep is not really a castle?" Miss Ardley asked, clearly disappointed, but trying not to seem so. "There once was a castle," Bradford said carelessly, "the country's seat of some great churchman or other, but Cromwell pulled it down during the Civil War, and there was little left save the odd flint rubble wall. Present residence is less than 70 years old. Not as romantic as a castle, but a damned sight less draughty, I'd warrant." A little of his flirtatious good humour seemed to be coming back, and he grinned. "If it's a romance you're after, Miss Ardley, you must visit Marston Manor. No ruin, but we have our own resident ghost." At the word ghost, Charles noticed, Miss Ardley leaned slightly forward, her face eager. She was no doubt impressed by Bradford's attention, as were most women. The brief sigh that escaped his lips as he turned away was largely unconscious. So Charles could not know, of course, that Kate was far less impressed by Miss Marston's person and the manner than by his last remark. "Is that truly a ghost?" she asked, trying to keep a hopeful note out of her voice. "Truly," Bradford said solemnly. Eleanor patted her hand. "Do come and be introduced to him, Catherine. Bradford will give you the life story of the wretched creature, and I'll just show off my wedding dress." Kate smiled. "I certainly shall," she said. "I don't imagine your ghost goes to weddings," she said, hoping to prompt Mr. Marston to say more. The corners of Bradford's mouth twitched, and his pale blue eyes were amused. No, but he is quite civil all the same. If you'll do us the honor of staying over the night, we can put you in the chamber which he frequents, in search of his missing head." "His head?" Kate exclaimed. "You mean he was murdered?" "Bradford!" Eleanor protested. "Ah," Bradford said knowingly, and to Kate's disappointment lapsed into silence. Eleanor launched into a lengthy description of the gown she planned to wear to the next ball, while Kate feigned interest. Eleanor's chatter seemed to plunge her brother further into gloom, so Charles sat quiet, thinking perhaps of his bats. Kate was half listening to Eleanor and watching the mist-draped groves on either side of the road when the carriage turned a sharp bend, a meadow opened, and Bishop's Keep loomed through the silver fog. She pressed a little "Oh," and leaned forward eagerly. But what Kate saw before her was not the splendor of castle walls that Bill Bardwell had conjured up in her novelistic imagination. It was instead a large and rather dull-looking Georgian residence, built of grey brick and decorated only by monotonous rows of tall windows capped with white-painted pediments. A pair of stone lions, more like sour toads than royal beasts, flanked the slate step that led down to the drive. Kate's disappointment stuck in her throat like a bitter pill. Bishop Keep, despite its romantic name, was only an ordinary home. No doubt the life she would lead there would be equally ordinary, conventionally routine and boring. So Charles glanced at her, the corners of his mouth amused. "Does Bishop Keep meet your expectation?" he asked mildly. Kate's lips thinned. The man had seen through her. How intolerable. "In every detail," she lied tartly. She gathered her skirts, accepted Bradford Marston's hand, and alighted from the carriage. The farewells took but a moment, and after a round of promises to exchange calls, Kate found her bag sitting beside one of the lions, and beside her and herself standing on the lowest step, waving. The coachman's whip cracked, the Marston carriage disappeared into the mist, and Kate turned reluctantly to face her fate. She stood looking for a moment, and stuck out her tongue at one of the lions, and marched up the stairs and down the walk to the massive oak door. She lifted her hand to the brass knocker. Bishop's Keep might not be a castle, but like it or not, she was here.